On this episode of China Uncensored, nothing says celebrating Chinese culture like destroying everyone else's culture. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. The Chinese Communist Party loves all the 56 ethnic minorities of China. For example, Tibetans. The party liberated Tibet from the mean old Dalai Lama and created a modern society by burning down temples, mostly wiping out the language, and let's not forget making lots and lots of dead bodies. And since this strategy was so effective at making Tibetans cooperative, why not try it in other ethnic regions of China? Well, that's just what the Communist Party has been doing in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region and its ethnic Uyghur population. And it's working just as well as you can imagine. I went down to Washington, D.C. to speak with Arada Kashgari, a Uyghur activist about the Chinese Communist Party's cultural genocide. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. I was born in East Turkestan in 1993. My parents immigrated to the United States in 1999. And I am a U.S. citizen, and ever since I was 5 years old, I've been a Uyghur human rights activist. I've been going to protests since then, complaining about what China's been doing to Uyghurs. And now I operate on a care and education, which is a Uyghur language school in Northern Virginia.
Okay. Now I understand that some people call East Turkestan a different name.
Yes. They do go by Xinjiang, but just like my name, for example, which my parents gave me the name Irada Jalil, they changed it to Urida Jalili. Similar to what they're doing, this is all part of their Sinicization. Their plans to try to completely suppress and get rid of Uyghurs in general, and that's why they renamed East Turkestan as Xinjiang. That is the name that they want to go by. The second you say East Turkestan, you're detained, you're sent away, you're considered a separatist. But that is the name given to us back in the 1800s.
Well, one thing I don't get is, I hear that all the ethnic minorities in China love the Communist Party. So, the Uyghurs, surely the Uyghurs also love the Communist Party.
You hear that, yes, but unfortunately that is not the case. That is false propaganda that they like to spread. Even before 2001, they used to say things like, oh, Uyghurs are so happy here. They love the Communist Party. They're great. We get along great.
Just like the Tibetans.
Just like the Tibetans. So no difference, right? We're not under any oppression.
No.
So the unhappiness is because of that oppression, because even back in history, before in the 1900s, what would happen is Uyghurs would get to a certain part of their career, or they'd have caps. It would be racism. They'd be capped off at a certain position. They don't have any self-determination even back then, and that's where the unhappiness comes from.
So just as for our audience who might not have a super clear idea of the Uyghur people, can you tell us a little bit about the Uyghur identity?
Yeah, we're Turkic Muslims. We've been in existence for a very long time. We've had our own country. We have our own country, currently oppressed. We are,
This feels so subversive. I love it.
We have a lot going on, and we have history, we have culture. We're Turkic, and we have a lot of Islamic points. For example, our text is Arabic, and we've been in existence for so long. We used to be nomadic people, and then we settled in the Northwest, similar to Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, etc. And in 1949, we were oppressed by the Communist Party.
Oppressed or liberated?
Oppressed.
Well, so you see this in Tibet as well as in Xinjiang or East Turkestan. I'm using both so people know the same page we're on. And like Tibet, you see an eradication of the traditional Tibetan culture. That's happening in Xinjiang as well, right?
That is correct. It's happening at an alarming rate. It started, as I mentioned, very early on, but it's getting more and more severe now. They're attacking children. They're handling the generations differently. So while they're arresting the people like me, my age and older, They are taking the younger kids that are still, developing their minds, and they are teaching them to forget who they are and to consider themselves Han Chinese. There are videos that have been released with kids who are Uyghur saying that they are Han Chinese. This is ridiculous. This is, how do you say that you're not one thing and then that you're another?
It's like ethnic genocide.
It's ethnic genocide, and they're making sure that any of our ideologies, any of our beliefs are completely being suppressed.
I hear so on Ramadan, which is a traditional holiday where people fast, correct?
Yes.
I hear they have even been giving Uyghur children candy to tempt them.
That's been going on for a while, actually. Really? Yeah. So even before the recent aggression, rise of aggression, they had been, purposefully during Ramadan, they'd been bringing candy and cookies to schools so that the kids would be more tempted. Now, that's not even the case. You have to eat. You have to even drink alcohol for adults, at least. I don't want to...
They're not forcing that on the kids yet, right?
Not yet.
Okay. So they're tempting them with candy. It's like the Communist Party has reached old child molester in a van level of evil.
Exactly. It's getting ridiculous. And at this time, they're sending these kids to schools far away from their parents. So there's two parts to this. One part is that kids are being sent to orphanages because their parents are being sent to re-education camps, so they have no adult supervision. So for those that aren't being left alone, they're being sent to orphanages as if they didn't have living parents or living family members. The other half, whose parents may not have been sent, and that's a very, very few, they are being sent to boarding schools. And this has been happening for a long time. And I know a specific girl who was a student here in the US, and she thought she wanted to go visit her parents 2 years ago. And she thought, she's very young, so she's innocent. She doesn't realize what's going on because she grew up in Chinese education. And she went back and she was immediately sent off to boarding school, even though all of her stuff is here. Her education is here in the United States. But the second she went back, off to boarding school. She was 14 years old. She stayed with me at my family's house, and she was at a private school very well because her parents were somewhat well off and were able to send her money. And now we don't know. Last we heard she went off to boarding school, but we don't know.
How is the Communist Party changing the face of Xinjiang, East Turkestan?
Well, first and foremost, they've destroyed one of our oldest cities, one of our oldest traditional cities, Kashgar. My last name actually is a note to that, so Kashgar. And they completely demolished this historic land with all of our ancient, buildings that contain a lot of history, and rebuilt on it to synthesize it and to remove any sort of history that was there. They destroy books, especially anything that contains religious texts. But at this point, so having something like a small term used once in the book means that they're going to destroy it. They're not allowing the language to be used at all. The language is banned. They're forcing people into the houses, Chinese party representatives into houses, so that they can spy and make sure that these Uyghur families are not associating with their culture in any way.
And as I understand, a lot of traditional beliefs are also being discouraged, to put it lightly.
Exactly. So the religious oppression is very intense. Anything that we believe in, we're not allowed to say, or they're not allowed to say, God bless or anything like that. They have to say Xi Jinping bless or the Chinese Communist Party bless. Yeah.
I'm going to start using that. Xi Jinping bless.
Yeah. I'm sure you could do a little hashtag and make that run off real quick.
Some things should not become viral.
I agree.
So Xinjiang is becoming a surveillance state, and people are even being monitored in their homes. What's the goal of all of this?
To make sure that people aren't associating themselves with Uyghur at all. This is all part of their plan to completely destroy the Uyghur culture, and to make sure that they're not teaching their kids, for example, or they're not, keeping anything from the party. This is all part of their, they're talking about the surveillance state. This is 100% Big Brother-esque level.
Big Brother's great, though.
Yeah, I mean, What can go wrong
Nice
when
and
they're watching your
safe.
every single move, and they have your
Absolutely.
kids? And there's been proof that they're asking the kids to tell on their parents. So if
Just
that's
like in the
not
Cultural
1984,
Revolution.
just like the Cultural Revolution.
So how successful is the party at this cultural genocide?
I think they are getting pretty successful. I think it's been happening at alarming rates. Earlier this year, we were talking about people being sent into these so-called re-education camps.
Vocational training
Schools, right? But really, let's be honest, they're a step away from being concentration camps. They're being sent to these at alarming rates because earlier this year, we were saying that there was 100,000, like around the 100,000. Now we're saying up to 3 million people. And the UN even released a report on this as well. So, they're being successful, and we need to speak up, or we need to do something as soon as possible.
I know the U.S. government has been more vocal about the situation there. What can the rest of the world do?
We can continue to be more and more vocal. The U.S. has been, taking lead on it. Recently, there's been the Uyghur Human Rights Act that's been released. But the international community, the EU, has spoken up as well. But it's still, speaking up is only the first step. We need to actually create acts. For example, the U.S. has the Magnitsky Act. We need to implement that. I think all countries need to implement it.
Can you just mention how that applies to specifically Xinjiang?
Yeah, there's many leaders like Chen Chuang-go that needs to be pinpointed that he can't come. That he needs to be sanctioned. There needs to be sanctions happening, and he needs to. We need to be able to say, look, you can't do this, and here are specific people doing this, and they need to pinpoint these leaders that are behind all of it.
So what happens to people who try and stand up to this inside of Xinjiang, East Turkestan?
There have been very small movements, for example, in the sense of people stand up by, we are very, we really value books and art and stuff like that. And the second someone even tries to do anything like that, they get imprisoned. We have many, many thought leaders, professors, authors that have been detained and sentenced to life in prison. Because they released a book a couple of years ago, they translated a religious text. For little things like that, they're getting imprisoned. For even studying abroad, they're getting imprisoned. There have been many people who studied abroad that we haven't heard from. We don't know where they are.
Why is the Communist Party targeting Uyghurs?
Any sort of dissent from the Communist Party angers them. They have this. They believe that they'll get success through the Sinicization of all cultures. And Uyghurs have a very strong cultural identity. And this makes them, for example, when they go out, they don't say that they're Chinese. They say they're Uyghur. This does not fall well with the communist leaders. Communist China is not okay with this. They want everyone to be Han Chinese in one sense. They don't want anything that might divert them from following, feeling any sort of way about the Communist Party besides all hail.
Well, that was very insightful. Thank you for joining us. If the audience would like to learn more about you or what you're doing, what can they do?
What they can do is they can visit many of our websites. We have uhrp.com, we have uaa.com. These are all sources. You can Google Uyghurs on Google, and you'll be able to learn a lot from there. Besides that, they can contact many of our leaders and make sure that, read on the Uyghur Human Rights Act, read on the Magnitsky Act, and see how that's implementing right now in the government.
Well, thank you for joining. It was great to talk to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for that fascinating interview.
Yeah, of course.
But there's actually so much more to talk about.
There is. I don't think we got to half of it.
Not even half. Fortunately, I spoke to Radha on the China Unscripted podcast, where it was so good.
Yeah, it was amazing, and we got to talk about much more of the issues that are really important.
And so I put a link below, so check it out.